The moment the story broke, it didn't feel like reality television anymore. It felt like something had gone very wrong. According to reports circulating online, Jennifer Williams was left reeling after learning that her husband had allegedly disappeared with money connected to what authorities are now examining as a possible scam. What followed was not a public outburst or a dramatic interview, but something far more unsettling. Silence, confusion, and visible emotional strain as the situation escalated beyond private betrayal into a legal nightmare. Let's be clear from the start. This story is not about confirmed convictions or finalized charges. It is about allegations, reported investigations, and the emotional impact of watching a personal relationship collapse while law enforcement attention intensifies. When the word police enters a situation like this, everything changes. It stops being gossip, it stops being speculation, and it starts carrying consequences that cannot be edited or spun away. According to people close to the situation, Jennifer was blindsided. What she believed was a partnership reportedly turned into a crisis overnight when questions began surfacing about missing funds and conflicting explanations. As details emerged, the narrative shifted rapidly from marital trust to alleged deception, and that shift is where the real damage began. Because betrayal hurts, but public betrayal under investigation hits differently. Social media reacted instantly, but not with the usual shade. Instead, there was shock. Viewers who had watched Jennifer present confidence and stability were now witnessing someone reportedly struggling to process how quickly her life had unraveled. The idea that someone you trust could vanish while leaving legal chaos behind is terrifying, and that fear was visible in how the story spread. This isn't just about money. It's about trust collapsing in real time while the walls close in. When police involvement is looming and answers are missing, the breakdown is not dramatic, it's quiet. And that's what makes this situation feel so bad. As more details began circulating, the situation surrounding Jennifer Williams started to look less like a sudden scandal and more like a slow collapse that had been building quietly. According to reports and online discussion, the money in question did not disappear overnight. Instead, questions began surfacing gradually through inconsistencies, delayed explanations, and transactions that allegedly did not add up. What initially may have looked like simple financial confusion reportedly evolved into something far more serious once outside parties began asking the same questions Jennifer herself was trying to understand. Sources close to the situation claim Jennifer believed the money was tied to legitimate business dealings. That belief matters because trust is what separates a partnership from a liability. When trust exists, questions get delayed. Red flags get rationalized, and concerns are often handled privately instead of urgently. But once explanations started conflicting and access to information became limited, the situation reportedly shifted from uncomfortable to alarming. At that point, the issue was no longer about finances alone. It was about transparency, accountability, and whether the truth was being deliberately withheld. The moment the husband was allegedly no longer reachable changed the tone completely. Disappearing in the middle of unresolved financial questions is not just emotionally devastating, it is legally dangerous. According to online reports, this was when authorities became aware of the situation, and the possibility of police involvement entered the conversation. That single development escalated everything. What may have once been addressed quietly now carried the weight of potential investigation, documentation, and legal consequences. For Jennifer, the emotional impact reportedly became visible as the story spread. This was not a controlled media moment or a strategic statement. This was a woman realizing that her personal life had collided with a possible criminal matter in the most public way imaginable. The breakdown people referenced online was not loud or theatrical. It was described as shock, disbelief, and the slow realization that answers might not come quickly, if at all. Public reaction shifted as well. Viewers stopped debating relationship drama and began expressing concern. The narrative moved away from judgment and toward fear because many people could imagine themselves in the same position, trusting the wrong person, being left with questions you cannot answer, and watching authorities step in while the person who owes you clarity is nowhere to be found. What makes this phase especially heavy is the uncertainty. There are no confirmed outcomes yet. No final charges publicly established. No clear resolution. Just an unfolding situation where silence, absence, and unanswered questions create pressure from every direction. For Jennifer, the alleged scam is not just a headline. It is a reality that threatens her finances, her peace, and her sense of security all at once. This is the point where the story stops being about what might have happened and starts being about what happens next. Because when money is missing, explanations fail, and law enforcement attention increases, the fallout doesn't end quickly. It stretches, and the emotional cost grows heavier with every unanswered call. Once the possibility of police involvement entered the conversation, the situation surrounding Jennifer Williams shifted from alarming to destabilizing. There is a clear difference between private betrayal and a matter that may draw the attention of law enforcement. According to online reports, this was the moment when fear replaced confusion. When money is allegedly missing and explanations stop making sense, the involvement of authorities is no longer hypothetical. It becomes a looming reality, and that reality carries weight that cannot be managed emotionally alone. At this stage, everything slows down on the surface and accelerates underneath. Jennifer reportedly found herself dealing with two crises at once. One was deeply personal, the emotional shock of realizing the person she trusted may have misled her. The other was structural and far more intimidating, the possibility that financial questions could turn into formal inquiries. That dual pressure is what often leads to visible emotional strain. Not because answers are known, but because answers are absent. Public reaction evolved quickly. Early conversations focused on shock and disbelief, but as the police angle gained traction, the tone became more serious. Viewers stopped speculating about relationship drama and began discussing consequences. Many expressed concern for Jennifer's safety, finances, and mental state. Others pointed out how quickly trust can turn into vulnerability when one person controls information and access. The empathy in the conversation grew, not because the story became clearer, but because it became scarier. Silence played a major role during this phase. According to reports, there was no immediate public clarification from the husband at the center of the allegations. That absence fueled uncertainty. When someone allegedly disappears while financial questions remain unresolved, the lack of communication becomes part of the narrative. Silence stops being neutral and starts being interpreted as evasion, even before any facts are established. This is where situations like this become especially dangerous, because interpretation begins to replace evidence. For Jennifer, the pressure reportedly became impossible to compartmentalize. Legal stress does not stay in one lane. It bleeds into sleep, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Every phone call feels urgent. Every unknown number feels threatening. Every delay feels intentional. This is how breakdowns happen in real life, not through dramatic scenes, but through sustained uncertainty and loss of control. The emotional weight of not knowing where the money is, or what authorities may uncover, compounds daily. Media coverage also shifted in this phase. Headlines became more cautious but more serious, using language like alleged, under investigation, and police interest. While this protects outlets legally, it also signals escalation to the public. People assume that if police are mentioned at all, the situation must be severe. That assumption, fair or not, increases pressure on everyone involved. Reputation begins to suffer not because of proven wrongdoing, but because of association with uncertainty. Another overlooked aspect of this stage is isolation. When legal matters loom, circles tighten. Advice comes from lawyers, not friends. Conversations become guarded, trust shrinks. For someone already dealing with emotional betrayal, that isolation can intensify distress. Jennifer was no longer navigating a personal issue with support and reassurance. She was reportedly navigating a potential legal crisis where every word and action could matter later. Online, the conversation became polarized. Some people questioned how the situation could have gone unnoticed, while others emphasized how easily manipulation can occur within relationships. The more informed voices pointed out that alleged scams often rely on emotional access before financial access. Trust is not a flaw, it is a vulnerability that can be exploited. This reframing shifted blame away from the person affected and toward the alleged behavior under scrutiny. As days passed, one thing became clear: resolution was not coming quickly. Police involvement, even at an early or exploratory stage, moves slowly. Investigations take time, paper trails need to be followed, statements need to be verified. For the public, that waiting period feels like suspense. For the person living it, it feels like paralysis. Life cannot move forward until clarity arrives, but clarity has no deadline. This is the phase where long-term consequences begin to take shape. Financial recovery, if possible, is rarely immediate. Emotional recovery takes even longer, and public perception, once formed, does not reset easily. Even without charges or convictions, the story leaves a mark. It becomes something that follows a name, a relationship, and a period of life that will always be associated with loss and uncertainty. By the end of this stage, the story had fully transformed. It was no longer about a husband allegedly running off with money. It was about what happens when trust collapses under the weight of unanswered questions and possible legal consequences. The fear was no longer hypothetical. It was present, sustained, and deeply personal. And this is where the story stops being about reaction and starts being about survival. As time passed, the situation surrounding Jennifer Williams stopped feeling like a breaking headline and started feeling like a permanent weight. This is the stage most people never see clearly, because it does not trend the way chaos does. There are no new clips, no shocking updates every hour, and no clear resolution to react to. Instead, there is waiting for answers, waiting for authorities to determine next steps, waiting to understand whether the damage done can ever be fully undone. The emotional toll during this phase is often misunderstood. From the outside, it may appear that nothing is happening, but internally, everything feels unstable. When financial questions remain unresolved and the person who could provide clarity is allegedly absent, the mind fills the gaps with worst-case scenarios. Fear becomes routine. Trust in one's own judgment begins to erode. People start replaying conversations, revisiting decisions, and questioning moments that once felt normal. This kind of mental spiral does not announce itself loudly. It wears a person down quietly day by day. Another layer of pressure comes from the lack of control. In situations where possible police involvement exists, timelines are no longer personal. They belong to processes, paperwork, and institutions that move slowly by design. There is no fast explanation, no immediate closure, and no guarantee of recovery. That uncertainty can be more distressing than bad news, because it leaves no clear path forward. Life feels paused, but the stress continues to accumulate. Public perception also begins to shift during this period. While early reactions were driven by shock and sympathy, prolonged uncertainty often leads to speculation fatigue. Some people lose interest, others grow cynical. A few begin asking unfair questions about how the situation happened in the first place. This is where the narrative can quietly turn, not through new facts but through assumptions. When stories linger without resolution, audiences sometimes search for someone to blame, even if that blame is misplaced. For Jennifer, this phase reportedly meant navigating both private pain and public association with a situation she did not create. Even without confirmed outcomes, her name became tied to words like alleged scam and police interest. Those associations matter, especially in a digital world where search results do not distinguish between accusation and conclusion. This is one of the most damaging aspects of unresolved legal situations. The stain does not require guilt, it only requires proximity. Financial fallout is another reality that cannot be ignored. Even if money is eventually recovered, the process itself can be draining. Legal fees, frozen accounts, and disrupted income streams often accompany situations involving alleged financial misconduct. For someone who believed their personal and financial life was secure, this kind of instability can feel like losing the ground beneath your feet. It affects daily decisions, future plans, and overall sense of safety. Emotionally, the idea of betrayal compounds everything. Losing money hurts. Losing trust hurts more. When the person involved is a spouse, the collapse is not just external, it is internal. Identity becomes shaken. Questions about judgment, vulnerability, and self-worth surface unexpectedly. Many people in similar situations describe feeling embarrassed even when they did nothing wrong, simply because the betrayal happened so publicly. That shame is undeserved, but it is real. Isolation often grows during this stage as well. Legal caution can limit what is shared with friends or family. Conversations become guarded. Support systems shrink unintentionally. At the same time, public scrutiny makes privacy feel unsafe. The result is a sense of being surrounded by attention, but lacking true connection. This emotional isolation is one of the most underestimated consequences of situations involving alleged fraud and law enforcement attention. The absence of the husband at the center of the allegations continued to loom large in public discussion. When someone is reportedly unreachable during a crisis of this magnitude, it fuels fear and anger simultaneously. People want explanations, they want accountability, but accountability cannot happen without presence. That absence becomes symbolic of everything that went wrong, even before any facts are legally established. Over time, the story stopped being framed as a dramatic moment and started being understood as a cautionary tale. Not about wealth or fame, but about how easily trust can be weaponized. Viewers began relating the situation to their own lives, imagining what they would do if their partner vanished amid unanswered financial questions. That relatability is what kept the story alive quietly, even as headlines faded. This is the phase where survival becomes the focus, not winning public opinion, not correcting every rumor, just getting through each day without the situation defining every thought. Healing, if it comes, does not arrive quickly. It comes in fragments, moments of normalcy, small regains of control, a slow rebuilding of stability that happens off camera and without applause. By the end of this phase, one truth stands out clearly. Even without a final legal conclusion, the impact of what allegedly happened cannot be erased. Trust has been broken, security has been shaken, and a chapter of life has been permanently altered. This is not the kind of breakdown that looks dramatic from the outside. It is the kind that changes how someone moves through the world forever. By the time stories like this stop trending, the damage has already settled into something deeper than headlines. What began as alleged missing money and a husband reportedly running off does not end with public curiosity fading. It ends with a person having to rebuild trust, security, and peace in a world that now feels unpredictable. For Jennifer Williams, this moment was not just about financial loss or legal uncertainty. It was about the collapse of safety inside a relationship that was supposed to provide stability, not fear. Situations involving alleged scams and police interest expose an uncomfortable truth about real life that reality television rarely shows clearly. Betrayal is not dramatic in the long run. It is exhausting. It shows up in unanswered questions, in nights without sleep, and in the constant awareness that control has been taken away. Even without confirmed outcomes, the emotional impact is real, and it does not disappear simply because the internet moves on to the next story. This is also a moment that forces a broader conversation. How quickly do we judge the person left behind instead of focusing on the behavior under scrutiny? Why do we expect someone dealing with possible legal chaos to explain themselves publicly while investigations are still unclear? And how often do we forget that behind every headline is a real person dealing with consequences that do not reset when the timeline refreshes? Stories like this should not be consumed as entertainment alone. They are reminders of how easily trust can be exploited and how devastating the fallout can be when transparency disappears. They also show why silence is sometimes the only option left, not because someone has something to hide, but because speaking too soon can cause even more harm. Now it's your turn to think about what you've watched unfold. Do you believe public figures are judged too harshly when they become victims of alleged financial betrayal? Should the internet slow down before turning unverified situations into spectacle? And when police involvement is possible, should empathy come before commentary? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who thinks scams only happen to careless people. And remember this, trust is not weakness, and being blindsided does not mean being foolish. Sometimes it just means you believed the wrong person, and the cost of that belief can change everything.